Brian's barking interrupted Glenn's writing, but Brian insisted he was protecting the neighborhood. He sensed that coyotes were about to attack. Glenn didn't believe him and told Brian to keep quiet, but Brian said he couldn't. That afternoon, Joe showed up and said someone had reported Brian for disturbing the peace. According to the town's regulations, Brian had to wear an anti-bark collar that would shock him whenever his barking got too loud. Joe also said the collar couldn't be removed unless the person who filed the complaint forgave him. Brian thought he could control himself, but when Peter came home, he couldn't resist his dog instincts. The moment he barked happily, he got shocked. The next day, Brian went to talk to Glenn, but Glenn refused to forgive him, saying the world was much quieter without Brian's barking. Angry, Brian sneaked into Glenn's room while he was asleep and put a shock collar on him too. A few days later, Brian was drinking with his friends when Glenn suddenly kicked the door open and demanded that Brian remove the collar. Brian refused, and they argued until their voices grew quieter. That night, Glenn went out to take out the trash, but the bag suddenly burst open, covering him in a foul smell. Unfortunately, the smell attracted several coyotes, and Glenn finally realized Brian's warning had been real. But he couldn't yell for help because the collar only allowed him to speak softly. Unexpectedly, Brian heard his faint cries. Just as the coyotes were about to attack, Brian arrived. Glenn tried to send him away, thinking he was just a small dog, but Brian had a plan. When the coyotes bit him, his screams triggered the collar's shock, sending electric jolts through the coyotes too. The coyotes were scared off, and Glenn was deeply moved. Brian said that as a dog, it was his duty to protect his family and the community.